You need more evidence that the Republican Party is composed exclusively of grifters and people too clueless to realize they're being grifted? Well, here you go. Last week, under the leadership of newly minted Speaker of the House Mike Johnson, the House of Representatives passed a bill to allocate additional aid to the State of Israel for its war against, theoretically, Hamas, because it sure would be a shame if the IDF ran out of bullets and bombs before they've killed every last person in Gaza, huh? The aid bill passed by Congress is the very definition of dead-end political theater. President Biden has already promised to veto it because it doesn't include humanitarian aid and additional funding for Ukraine in its going war against Russia, but it probably won't make it far enough for Biden to veto it because Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has already said he won't even bring the House bill to a vote. Besides being dead on arrival, Johnson's bill is bullshit for another reason. In addition to allocating $14 billion in aid to the State of Israel, it also cuts $14 billion in funding to the Internal Revenue Service. What does one have to do with the other? Johnson insists the IRS cuts are to offset the money being spent on aid to Israel. It's all about fiscal responsibility, see? Government needs to live within its means. Republicans are always saying that. They've been saying that for as long as I can remember. The deficit is too high. We need to curb government spending. If we want to help the IDF pay for bombing refugee camps, we need to find that money somewhere else in the budget. And if to find it we have to cut funding to the IRS, well, that's even better, because we all know how much these assholes hate paying their taxes. So, this is just Mike Johnson and his fellow House Republicans quite literally putting their money where their mouths are, right? Well, no, not really. The Congressional Budget Office, the nonpartisan federal agency that analyzes the financial impact of legislation, estimates that the $14 billion cut to the IRS budget in the Republican bill wouldn't save the government any money at all and would actually wind up costing the government almost as much as Mike Johnson claims it saves. How does that work? Well, the $14 billion the House bill cuts from the IRS budget comes from money specifically allocated to fund audits on high-income tax evaders, rich people and corporations suspected of not paying their taxes. If the IRS doesn't collect what those high-income taxpayers owe, the government doesn't get that money. The CBO estimates that $14 billion cut to the IRS budget would result in a nearly $27 billion decrease in federal government revenue over the next 10 years and would increase the federal budget deficit by $12.5 billion. By the way, the IRS's own estimate for how much the budget cut would wind up costing the government is even bigger. IRS Commissioner Danny Werfel told the Associated Press that it would result in lost revenue totaling $90 billion over the next 10 years. But hey, just to be fair, I'll take the CBO estimate. The cuts to the IRS will cost the government $27 billion in lost revenue and will increase the federal deficit by $12.5 billion. Mike Johnson claims to be doing this in the name of fiscal responsibility, but his cuts will actually increase the deficit by an amount only $1.5 billion less than the amount he's supposedly saving. Mike Johnson knows this, by the way. This CBO report was announced the day before the bill was passed, and it's not a long read. It's a one-page chart. This is it right here. This is the entire thing. Mike Johnson knew that his claims of saving money by cutting this IRS funding to pay for our contribution to the Israeli Defense Forces Collective Punishment Fund were bullshit before the bill went to a vote, but he put it up for a vote anyway, and he continues to claim that it's about saving money because he knows that sounds good to his base, and he doesn't care what the truth is. They all know. Every Republican politician and professional pundit knows how pretended their pretensions to fiscal responsibility are. They stand up on the House floor and give their speeches or go on cable news and act all pious about saving the American people money and forcing government to live within its means, but it's an act. They're concerned about the size of the national debt, and the deficit goes about as deep as Ron DeSantis' toes go into those lifted cowboy boots of his. Their fiscal piety, like all Republican piety, is false. They only admit it in public when they're accusing each other of it, but it applies to every single one of them. Why are they like this? Why do they do this? I referred to it a moment ago. The base likes it. Republican voters, the only reliable supporters the party has left, like to imagine themselves the adults in the room as they shriek about the imagined threats of queer people and people of color and immigrants and refugees and labor unions and public school teachers and science and books and all the other monsters they've convinced themselves are hiding under their beds. And carrying on about the importance of fiscal responsibility allows them to do that. They're the grown-ups. They care about dollars and cents, facts, not feelings, and they care about all the bigotry and intolerance and scapegoating and fear-mongering the Republican Party broadcasts to them constantly as well, but acting like they know or care about things like tax policy and government budget deficits lets them imagine they're serious people, which is very important to them, because serious people they are not. So, Republican politicians like Mike Johnson and Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump and all the rest of them, even the quote-unquote good ones like Mitt Romney or my state's former governor Larry Hogan, they talk about responsible fiscal policy and they put on little plays like the one the House Republicans just did by passing this do-nothing, going-nowhere bill to finance the state of Israel as it continues to defend itself from the threat of terrified Palestinian children because the base likes it and they want the base to vote for them and to give them money when they're campaigning for re-election, and they're always campaigning for re-election. The word we use for those who lie in order to get people to give them money is grifter. Actually, that's only one of the many words we use for that. And gee, I wonder why we have so many words for that. Besides grifter, there's also con artist and fraudster and scammer and swindler. I've always liked that one. It's a lovely word, which we don't use nearly as often as we should, but I'm glad we don't generally use it to refer to grifting politicians. It has a certain romantic, bygone quality, and we wouldn't want to unintentionally tag these rat fucks as sympathetic, rascally rogues. You're not Robin Hood, Mike. You're Prince John. And not even one of the good ones. You're the Richard Lewis version from Robin Hood Men in Tights. All due respect to Richard Lewis, it wasn't his fault. Mel Brooks had to miss at some point. Grifters selling snake oil, gullible oafs eagerly buying it, and phonies like Romney and Hogan and other so-called respectable Republicans acting like they're different from the grifters in any way that actually matters. That's the Republican Party in 2023. That's been the Republican Party since the end of the progressive era more than 100 years ago, I suspect. It's just been a lot easier to see these past, 15 years or so. Something happened around 2008 that made the true nature of the Republican Party a lot more apparent. What was it? Grifters, oafs, and phonies. Hey, the GOP, look at that. Wow, how about that? It's almost as if I twisted myself Ralph Dibny-like into a rhetorical knot while writing the script for this to make it come out that way. I think it works reasonably well as a model for sorting out the various Republicans. It's not perfect because you've always got those who resist categorization, like Trump, who embodies the characteristics of all three. He's definitely a grifter. He's been a phony for as long as you've known his name. And if he's not an oaf, there's never been one born. He's basically Jane from Firefly with all of the reactionary dull-wittedness, but none of the lummox-like charm. I think I also just described Adam Baldwin. Fitting. A little while ago, I did a video where I said that Republicans are not serious people. And this was when the Republicans in the House of Representatives were struggling to carry out that most basic and necessary of all their parliamentary duties and elect a Speaker of the House before they settled on Mike fucking Johnson to lead them. I stand by what I said in that video, but I do want to clarify something. Quite a few people left comments saying things like, they'll literally impose fascism if we let them. I'd call that pretty serious. And the people who left those comments are right. the threat posed by the Mike Johnsons and the Jim Jordans and the Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Matt Gaetzes and the Ron DeSantises and the Donald Trumps and all the rest of them, the threat is real and is absolutely serious. The fact that they are intellectually and morally unserious people only makes the threat they represent to the Constitution, the rule of law, and democracy itself, not to mention the lives and liberties of everyone in the country, particularly those in marginalized communities, that much graver. Serious people? No. Dishonest, ignorant, selfish, bigoted, irresponsible, unethical people. But people like that, grifters, oafs, and phonies, holding political power and plotting to keep that power regardless of election results, that is serious and dangerous, and we can't ever forget it.